Welcome to this component-free screencast on the Weberian theory of social inequality. Now, alongside Karl Marx and Emil Durkheim, Max Weber is regarded as one of the founders of sociology, and he's particularly famous for his analyses of capitalism, and to some extent the work of Max Weber builds upon and critiques the earlier work of Karl Marx. Like Karl Marx, Max Weber regarded society as being characterized by conflicts over power and resources. And Weber defined power as the ability to get your own way, even when other people resist. Now, Max Weber, like Marx, believed that society was organized in a stratified system of hierarchy, with some people being more powerful and other people being less able to dominate or resist that power. So Weber therefore agrees with Marx that relations of inequality are central to social life. However, Weber rejects the Marxist idea that class inequality is always the most significant form of social inequality. For Weber, status groups, that is, groups possessing certain amounts of prestige or social honour, and parties, that is, organised groups of people possessing certain amounts of political power, can be just as significant sources of social inequality as class membership. And therefore a major strength of the Weberian approach is it avoids the problem of economic determinism associated with Marxism, because it adopts a multi-dimensional approach to the study of social inequality. For Max Weber, the concept of class refers to people who share the same economic interests. And according to Weber, class divisions derive not simply from ownership or lack of ownership of the means of production, as is the case for traditional Marxists, but also from an individual's capacity to obtain financial rewards for selling their skills within society's marketplace. And this is referred to as the market situation of individuals. So some individuals are able to demand more money, better jobs because of their skills and their qualifications, which obviously affect the types of work and the types of pay that they're able to obtain. For example, those in managerial or professional white-collar occupations generally earn more and have more favourable conditions of work than people in blue-collar manual working-class jobs. So the qualifications that white-collar workers possess, such as a degree, diplomas, and the skills that they've acquired, make them more marketable than others without such qualifications. And similarly, if we look at blue-collar manual working-class workers, a skilled craftsperson would be able to secure higher wages than the semi or unskilled. Different classes have different life chances, and life chances are described by Weber as access to things that are regarded as necessary and desirable in a society, such as access to food, housing, good health, educational and job opportunities. Weber distinguished the following class groupings in capitalist society. So firstly, we have the propertied upper class, the group that Marx referred to as the bourgeoisie. At the bottom, we have the manual working class, but then in between the top and the bottom, we have two important intermediate social classes. We have white-collar workers, so people like middle-class professionals and managers, and also we have the self-employed, or the petty bourgeoisie. Weber also argued that there are important divisions within each of these four broad social classes. And unlike Marx, Weber argued that the white-collar middle class expands rather than contracts as capitalism develops. So he maintained that capitalist enterprises and the modern nation state require a rational bureaucratic administration that involves large numbers of white-collar, admin, clerical and managerial staff. Whilst class forms one possible basis for social inequality, Weber argued that other factors needed to be taken into account, including the status of particular groups. And in Weber's work, this concept of status refers to differences between social groups in the amounts of prestige that they're accorded by others. And prestige is the respect and social honour given to some people in society. So whereas class refers to the unequal distribution of economic or financial rewards, status refers to the unequal distribution of social honour or prestige. And Weber argued that the relationship between class and status isn't always obvious and clear-cut. Weber argued that status often varies independently of class. Possession of wealth can obviously sometimes confer high status, but this is not universally the case. Drug dealers, for example, may be multimillionaires, but they aren't well respected and therefore aren't ranked high in a stratification system based on status. On the flip side, an academic working in a university may earn a relatively modest salary, but they command a fair amount of respect, prestige and social honour, so they have a higher status. Now, occupations, ethnic and religious groups, lifestyles can all be accorded different levels of status within society. Furthermore, some societies are patriarchal and judge females as having less status than men. And a status group, therefore, is a group made up of individuals who are awarded a similar amount of social honour, and they often share a similar lifestyle and social identity. Now, members of some status groups might try to place restrictions on outsiders joining them, and this is known as social closure. So social closure involves the exclusion of some people from membership of a status group. A concrete example in the contemporary UK would be those studies that suggest that those who've attended elite private schools, what are referred to as public schools, usually fill certain types of occupations, and this type of social closure is often referred to as elite self-recruitment. Weber also identified a third form of inequality, which he called party, and he was referring not just to political parties, but to any organised group of individuals which try to gain power and influence society. So, for example, in addition to political parties, these groups would also include various forms of pressure groups that seek to influence government policy. Some of these political groups are clearly linked to class interests. For example, many trade unions represent groups within the working class. However, pressure groups often draw their members from all social classes, and some pressure groups might also represent specific status groups. For example, the pressure group Stonewall campaigns for the rights of lesbian, gay and bisexual people. So the existence of these other dimensions of status and party, in addition to class, make Weber's conflict model of stratification and social inequality far more complex than simply a battle between the rich and the poor. And Weber was sceptical as to whether or not a revolution resulting in the overthrow of capitalism would actually occur in Western societies, and he also suggested that communism, the alternative to capitalism proposed by Marx, might end up being just as oppressive as capitalism. Now, Weber's approach to stratification has been adopted and developed by many sociologists as it allows them to create more complex and multidimensional models of how society is stratified and divided. And compared to Marx's approaches, it is much easier to explain social inequality by things like gender, ethnicity, and age, since the position of these groups can be described in general terms relating to both their market situation, their status, as well as their ability to organise in a political sense. And the Weberian approach rightly identifies that people may come together and identify with others not simply on the basis of economic interests, but also because of a shared status position or shared political goals. So, for example, in the 1960s and the 1970s, the women's liberation movement tried to bring together women from all social class backgrounds to campaign for women's rights. The main criticism of the Weberian approach comes from Marxism. Marxists argue that focusing on multiple dimensions of inequality obscures the fundamental importance, as they would see it, of class divisions within capitalist societies. So Marxists would argue that the status distinctions that Weber talks about that exist within the working class are often simply encouraged as a means of divide and rule by the ruling class, and that the really important political struggles are ultimately linked to the class struggle and conflicts over economic interests. Nevertheless, in spite of these criticisms, as we shall see in the next screencast, Weber's ideas have had considerable influence on modern sociologists.